My name is Zaid, and when I was a child, people did not see me first, they saw my father. Everywhere we went, doors opened for him. Men stood up when he entered a room. Women whispered blessings when his name was mentioned. He was wealthy, respected, and known across the city for building mosques, paying for large religious gatherings, and helping leaders when money was needed. Because of him, our family name carried weight. Because of him, I grew up surrounded by rules, expectations, and silence. From a young age, I was taught what to say, how to stand, when to bow my head, and what questions were not allowed. I was told that obedience was strength and that doubt was weakness. I tried very hard to be the son my father wanted. I memorized words. I followed routines. I kept my face calm even when my heart felt confused. People often said I was lucky to be born into such a powerful home, but inside, I felt small. I felt like I was living inside a shadow that was not mine. At night, when the house was quiet and the city lights dimmed, I sometimes wondered why fear lived so close to faith in my heart. I did not know how to explain it, and I did not dare ask. I only knew that something in me was waiting, searching, listening for an answer I could not yet name. One night, after a long day filled with lessons and quiet obedience, I fell asleep without knowing that my life was about to turn. My body rested, but my heart stayed awake. In my sleep, I became aware of a presence that was calm and steady, not heavy like fear and not loud like anger. He revealed himself to me in a way I could understand, not as someone forcing me, but as someone inviting me. I felt seen, fully known, and still accepted. He let me know things about myself that I had never spoken out loud. He showed me that the questions in my heart were not wrong and that my searching did not make me weak. I became aware of love that did not demand fear before giving peace. This love felt strong, clean, and gentle at the same time. I did not hear shouted words or threats. Instead, I understood clearly, as if truth was being placed gently inside my heart. When I woke up, my face was wet with tears, and my chest felt tight, but not in pain. I sat up on my mat, listening to the early sounds of the city. Nothing in the room had changed, yet everything inside me had. I knew I had met Jesus, even though I did not yet understand who he was fully or what it would cost me to seek him. What I did know was that I could not pretend the dream had not happened. For days, the memory followed me. During meals, during prayers, during lessons, his presence stayed with me like a quiet light. I became restless, not because I wanted trouble, but because my heart had been touched, and it would not return to sleep. I felt a pull toward answers, toward truth, toward a place where I could ask without fear. That was when I began to notice the small church at the edge of the city. The church was not large or beautiful like the buildings my father helped raise. It sat quietly at the edge of the city, old and almost hidden, as if it did not want attention. I passed it many times before, but I had never truly seen it. After the dream, my eyes kept returning to it. My heart beat faster each time I walked by, not from fear alone, but from a strange hope I did not yet understand. One afternoon, when I knew my father was busy and no one was watching me closely, I changed my path and walked toward the church. My steps were slow. I kept looking behind me, afraid someone would recognize me and report me. I was only 12 years old, and the weight of what I was doing felt far heavier than my age. Still, something inside me urged me forward, steady and calm. When I entered, the air felt different. It was quiet but not empty. A few people sat inside, praying softly or reading. No one shouted. No one stared at me with anger. I felt nervous but not threatened. I sat on a bench near the back and listened. I did not understand everything, but I felt peace settle over me, the same kind of peace I had felt in my sleep. I knew I was in a place where my questions were allowed to breathe. I did not stay long. I was afraid of being missed at home. As I stood to leave, I did not know that eyes had already seen me, and words had already begun to travel back to my father. I walked out of the church unaware that the small step I had taken would soon bring fire, fear, and a moment that would change many lives, including mine. I had barely reached the main road when I sensed something was wrong. The air felt heavy, and my heart would not settle. By the time I arrived home, the house was already awake in a way it should not have been. Voices were low but sharp. People moved quickly. When my father appeared, his face was not the one I knew from public gatherings. It was tight with anger and wounded pride. He let me know that my steps had been watched and my visit had been reported. I did not argue. I could not. I stood still as he spoke, and each word felt like a door closing behind me. He revealed his shame more than his concern. To him, it was not just about me entering a church. It was about his name, his honor, and the fear that others would think he had failed. Before I understood what was happening, messages were sent out. Young men loyal to my father began to gather. Some of them had eaten in our house before. Some had carried me on their shoulders when I was younger. Now their faces were hard, driven by duty and anger. I felt very small standing among them, a boy caught in a storm he did not create. They led me back toward the church, not gently and not kindly. My feet dragged against the ground, and my mind raced with fear. I did not know what would happen next. All I knew was that the peace I had felt earlier seemed far away, and yet, deep inside, I sensed I was not alone, even as night began to fall and the smell of fuel reached my nose. When we reached the church, the place no longer looked quiet or small. It was surrounded by angry voices and fast movements. Containers of fuel were brought forward, and the sharp smell filled the air. I stood there shaking, not only because I was afraid of the fire, but because I could not understand how faith could turn people into this. I was 12 years old, watching grown men prepare to destroy a place where I had only asked questions. Fuel was poured along the walls and near the doors. Some of it splashed onto the ground near my feet. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. I felt trapped between my father's anger and the quiet truth that had begun to grow inside me. When the fire was set, the flames rose quickly, loud and bright, lighting up the night sky. People shouted and stepped back as the fire grew. Heat pressed against my face, and smoke filled the air. I covered my mouth and coughed, tears running down my cheeks. In that moment, fear should have swallowed me completely. But then I became aware of something else, something steady and unmoved above the chaos. As I looked up, through the smoke and flames, I saw an angel standing on the roof of the church. He was not shaken by the fire. He was calm, bright, and firm, as if the flames had no authority over him. My fear paused. My heart went quiet. I knew I was seeing something real, something not meant to harm but to reveal. As I kept my eyes on the angel, something strange began to happen. The fire that had been strong and wild started to slow. It did not spread the way fire normally does. Instead of growing louder and brighter, it weakened, as if something inside it was being taken away. The flames near the center of the church began to shrink first, even though no one touched them. People noticed and stepped closer, confused. Some thought it was the wind, others thought the fuel was finished, but I could see clearly that this was not normal. The fire was not being stopped from outside. It was dying from within the church itself, moving outward little by little. Smoke thinned. Heat faded. The loud crackling sounds grew quiet. Fear changed the faces around me. The same men who had shouted before now stepped back in silence. Hands that had held fuel containers began to tremble. No one spoke my father's name. No one gave orders. It was as if authority had left the place, replaced by something greater that no one could control. When the last flames disappeared, the church still stood. The walls were darkened, but not destroyed. The roof remained. The night air felt cool again. I realized my body was no longer shaking. Deep inside, I understood that Jesus had not come to argue or fight, but to show power through peace. That night, something ended and something else began, not just for me, but for everyone who saw the fire refuse to burn. After the fire disappeared, no one knew what to say. The crowd slowly broke apart, each person leaving with lowered eyes and heavy steps. My father did not shout anymore. He did not touch me. His anger had turned into something quiet and hard. We walked home without words, and the sound of our footsteps felt louder than the fire had been. At home, everything looked the same, but it was not. People avoided my eyes. Some servants whispered when they thought I could not hear. My father kept his distance from me, not because he no longer cared, but because he did not understand me. I was no longer just his son. I had become a question he did not know how to answer. In the days that followed, no one spoke about the church or the fire. It was as if silence could erase what had happened. But inside me, the memory stayed clear. I remembered the calm in the middle of fear. I remembered the angel standing firm. I understood that what I had seen was not meant to make me proud, but to make me sure. I returned to my duties, my studies, and my quiet obedience, but my heart had changed. I learned how to be patient. I learned how to wait. I learned that sometimes faith grows best in silence. Deep inside, I knew my journey was not over. It was only resting, preparing for a time when I would need to take a step no one could take for me. Time moved forward, even though part of me felt frozen in that night. I grew from a boy into a young man inside my father's house. From the outside, my life looked normal again. I studied, I worked, I greeted visitors with respect, and I kept peace in the home. My father regained his honor in the city, and people spoke his name loudly once more. But inside me, something quiet and strong continued to grow. I did not rebel. I did not argue. I learned to listen more than I spoke. In the early mornings and late nights, when no one watched me, I remembered what had been revealed to me. I remembered the peace that did not depend on approval. I remembered that truth does not rush, but it also does not disappear. Those memories shaped my thoughts and my choices, even when my mouth stayed silent. Fear still visited me at times. I wondered what would happen if my heart was discovered again. I wondered if I would ever be free to live openly in what I believed. Yet, along with fear, there was guidance. I was being prepared slowly, carefully, like a seed growing underground. I began to understand that leaving too early would destroy me, but staying too long would stop me from growing. When the time finally came, it did not arrive with noise or drama. It came with clarity. I knew I would have to leave my father's house, my city, and everything familiar. Not in anger, not in pride, but in obedience to the path set before me. I was no longer the frightened 12-year-old boy. I was ready to walk forward. The night I left my father's house was quiet. There were no arguments, no packed crowd, and no shouting. I waited until everyone was asleep. I carried only a small bag with clothes and a little money I had saved over time. As I stepped outside, I looked back at the house where I had grown up. It held my childhood, my fear, my learning, and my waiting. My chest felt heavy, but my feet felt steady. I did not leave because I hated my father. I left because staying would slowly close my heart. I understood that love does not always mean remaining, and obedience to God sometimes means walking alone. As I moved through the sleeping streets, memories came to me like soft waves. I remembered the fire that stopped. I remembered the peace that did not leave me. I remembered that I had been shown a path, even if I could not yet see the whole road. The journey out of the city was long and uncertain. I traveled carefully, changing routes and keeping my head low. Fear followed me, but it did not control me. I felt guided, protected in ways I could not fully explain. Each step away from my old life felt painful, but also right. I was not running toward danger. I was walking toward truth. By the time I crossed into another nation, I knew I could never go back to who I was before. I was still Zaid, but I was also becoming someone new. I did not know where I would sleep the next night or who would help me. What I knew was that I was not abandoned. The same God who met me in a dream and stood firm in the fire was still leading me forward. In the new nation, no one knew my father's name. No one watched me with suspicion or fear. At first, that felt strange, like walking without a shadow. I stayed quiet and observed the people around me. I worked small jobs, learned the language better, and listened more than I spoke. Life was simple, sometimes hard, but it was honest. One day, I met Christians who welcomed me without asking for my past. They shared meals with me and prayed together in a way that felt sincere and gentle. As I spent time with them, I recognized the same peace I had felt in my dream and in the church that night long ago. I understood that faith here was not about power or control, but about love, truth, and walking together. Slowly, I began to share parts of my story. I did not exaggerate or perform. I spoke as someone who had seen fear and had also seen hope. As I spoke, I realized that my story was not only for me. It was meant to strengthen others who were afraid, confused, or alone. I learned that God often turns pain into purpose, not quickly, but faithfully. Among these believers, I found a family that did not replace my past but helped heal it. I learned how to pray with understanding, how to study God's word with patience, and how to love people who were different from me. The fire that once threatened to destroy me had become a light that guided my steps. Now, after all that has happened, I want to share what I have learned, not just as my story, but as a reminder for anyone who seeks God. Faith is not always easy. Sometimes it is quiet, hidden, and even dangerous. Sometimes it asks us to leave what is familiar, to trust even when nothing makes sense, and to follow a path that only God can show. But it is always worth it. I have learned that love is stronger than fear. It is stronger than anger, pride, or power. When we love God, we are called to love others too, even those who may not understand us or may have hurt us. Prayer is our voice to God, study is our guide, and community is the strength we lean on when the path feels too heavy. We are never meant to walk alone, even if the journey feels lonely. Remember that God meets us where we are. He speaks through dreams, through moments of calm, and through the courage to step forward. He does not force us, but He does not leave us either. Every act of obedience, every choice to forgive, every effort to understand His word builds a life that can stand through fire, fear, or confusion. To anyone reading this, hold fast. Pray sincerely, love deeply, and study God's word with your whole heart. Be patient with yourself, and be ready to step forward when He calls. The path may be difficult, but the peace, the hope, and the love that follow are far greater than we can imagine. Keep walking, keep seeking, and trust that the God who would not let me go will not let you go either.